Hello and welcome to the This Works For Me Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Fermpate Watson. I am the director of the Faculty Development Center at Murray State University. Are you looking for a strategy to gather meaningful and timely feedback while providing your learners with opportunities to reflect on their learning? Well, today's guest, Dr. Julaine Fowlin, will be providing you with some strategies to help you do so. And I think that these strategies will be useful to you whether you're a faculty or a faculty developer. Dr. Pauline, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. And I'm very excited about this conversation. So I'm going to yield the floor to you for a moment. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Well, currently I'm the Assistant Director for Curriculum Development and Implementation at Auburn University Harrison School of Pharmacy. My position was created because the School of Pharmacy is moving from being discipline-specific to an integrated competency-based curriculum. So I was granted the awesome challenge of leading that process from the ground up, and it has been what I call my delicious problem. I've been here from 2014, so it's been about 4 years. 5 years, 2018 would be 5 years. And sorry, I've been here since 2015. Sorry, I'm getting my dates wrong, 2015.
That's
so
okay.
2019. Yeah, so I've been here for too long, but good. And it has been a great process so far to just guide this change management process. Yeah.
And where are you from?
I'm originally from Jamaica. Yes. But right now I'm in Auburn, Alabama.
Okay, great. And for those of you, you might hear that we have similar accents. I'm originally from Jamaica too. And Dr. Pauline, it's a privilege to have you here today sharing. So the title of your strategy is Using Exit Slips to Guide Learning, Change Management, and Process Improvement. For those of us who might not be familiar with the concept, could you explain to us what are exit slips?
So like the term suggests, exit. So it's pretty much a survey that you give to students or persons who have participated in a process at the end. What makes exit slips unique is that they're guided by prompts based on the information that you want to gather. It usually has about 3 closed-ended or about 2 closed-ended questions and 1 or 2 open-ended questions that are guided by what you want to gather. And so it gets its name because you always give it at the end.
Okay, so help us understand what impressed you to start using exit slip as a strategy, and how has it worked for you?
So as you shared that this strategy can be used for both faculty developers and faculty members. So in faculty development, when you look at the strategies that engage learners and ways that faculty members can get feedback, exit slip was one of them that came up. And some of you are probably familiar with muddiest points as well. So I feel like the exit slip is in the same category as maybe your muddiest point, but you get a little bit more from it. Mm-hmm. As a faculty developer that's leading change, when you think about change, you want to think about that there's a model that talks about when people are in their current setting, it's as if they're frozen. And then when you're asking them to change, you need to do something to melt and then refreeze and get an understanding of how they're going through this change. Wow. And so with my job, I have to guide faculty teams to say, okay, then what is backward design? This is the next step. So I needed a way to get an understanding of how faculty were interpreting the process, how I was doing as I was leading them through the change. And as we all know, faculty members are very busy. And the same way that students will say, not another survey, faculty members are like, not another survey. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, if I use exit slips because it's so short, it would be a good way to get the information that I needed. It would also be an opportunity for faculty to pause and reflect on exactly how the process went. And because as a faculty developer, you always want faculty to get a taste of a strategy while they're in the position of a student. And so it served multi-functions. And so for me, it was also an opportunity for them to see I am using this as a faculty developer to get feedback from you. You can use it to get the same feedback from your students. And so those were the reasons why I decided to use it.
Wow, I really like that, especially how you're sharing that it's beneficial from the faculty perspective, but it's also beneficial from the learner's perspective. And often, even when in my experience, when, for example, I'm teaching faculty how to teach online, when they are in the online course themselves, they actually take back what I do to their class. So I like what you're sharing about that. So what kind of feedback have you gathered in this process?
So in a resource that I'll share later, you'll realize that exit slips can be used for formative feedback. They can be used to get students to get an idea of how students are studying, or after a group project. The way how I've used it is the question that I asked, how would you rate your current level of understanding of what we did today? And that's very closed. And I'll share this with Dr. Watson so you can have an idea of the questions that I use. Mm-hmm. And so the first question is it's on a scale of from 0 to 3, where 3 would be, I understand everything we did and can apply it to, because I'm using it in the curriculum, mm-hmm. I have and can apply it to the curriculum development process. Mm-hmm. But say, for example, you were teaching a pharmacology course, mm-hmm. you would probably say, I understand everything we did today and can apply it to pharmacology. And so these questions are easily tweaked. Number 2 would be, I understand everything we did, but I'm not sure I can apply the knowledge. 1 would be, I understand some of what we did today, but I'm confused about some parts. And 0, I understand very little of what we did today, and I feel completely lost. Mm-hmm. After that, I asked, what's one big understanding you got today? And this question is really important because in change management, as it is with learning, you always want a way for learners to self-report or to articulate what their understanding is, to give you an opportunity to see if their understanding is in line with your intended outcome. Mm-hmm. And so this question is very good. Then I asked, what are you confused about today? Because as instructional designers and faculty developers, we are trained not to take feedback personally and would really like to know if we conveyed something that we could do better. And so what are you most confused about? That question has always been helpful. And then we go on to any commendations or suggestions that they have for future sessions. So as I walk you through, you can see it's about 4 questions that I ask, and it's really quick. I use a Qualtrics survey to gather my data, and it's 1 survey. And those of you who are familiar with Qualtrics allows you to pull reports. So because it's 1 survey for 1 learning community, the link is the same from the very start of the process to the end, and I can pull reports by using the date. And so that's how I distinguish it. And I've used this with Poll Everywhere before. So if you're in a system and you have a clicker system, you can also get feedback that way. So you want to make it very short and make sure that you remind people at the end of the meeting or at the end of the class to go through the survey. So those are kind of the data that I've gathered. So throughout the process, I've learned, people have informed me that on my agenda there are too many links, or they get things mixed up with backward design. We talk about overarching understanding, essential questions, concepts. They let me know that they've gotten things mixed up. And on the other hand, sometimes they'll let me know I'm doing a good job. And everybody likes to know that sometimes. So it's very balanced feedback.
Right. I really like how you shared specific questions that you ask, because when someone hears of a strategy like this and they just think, oh, muddiest point. But the difference between your strategy and the muddiest point is that at least one part of your survey, you're providing prompts that your faculty, your learners, in this case faculty, can respond to in a meaningful way. And at the same time, they can still elaborate. And you mentioned a little bit about the feedback that you receive from your learners. Are there any other responses that you'd like to share regarding the use of this strategy?
In terms of what?
In terms of how has your learners responded to the use of this strategy?
Oh, got you. So far, what we found is that in the beginning, when they just get started and they're excited or anxious, the response rate is very high. And by the time they probably get more comfortable, the response rate is a little bit lower. but they really love it because another thing is that the survey is anonymous. And so they feel comfortable responding. And recently a staff member said to me that she wished that other committees or different people who do presentations will give this opportunity because it's mutually beneficial. It's an opportunity for them to give me feedback, but it's also an opportunity, like if you use it for learners, to stop and say, okay, then I went through this entire class session. What's the big understanding that I have left with? Pause and reflect and share. And so far it's been good, and I don't pressure them. I remind them during the meeting. If they give me feedback, they do. If they don't, then that's okay. I do electronic agendas, and so on my agendas, I usually for the next meeting, I put aggregate feedback. Oh, we had 6 responses. I put what were the suggestions, what were the areas that they needed clarifications on, and what they said. So that's also something to take back in the classroom. Sometimes we make a blunder of collecting data, but not sharing with the users or the learners how we're using the data, not providing them with evidence that the data is indeed valuable to us. And so with the faculty, they see that myself and the learning community chairs, we read it and we actually respond to it. So if you're collecting data, it's important. You don't have to read everybody's data because sometimes we have large classes, but just scan them and have a conversation with your class to say, this is what I learned from your exit slips. You're getting it, you're not getting it. I realize some of you were confused with this. This is how we're going to address it.
Wow, that is so true, because it's one thing to collect this information, but if the students or your learners, in your case faculty, see that you're not using it, then they will not see any sense in doing it. So really thanks for emphasizing that point. So I think along the way you have mentioned, challenges in terms of, whether or not people decide to complete these surveys, but are there any challenges that are associated with this, or is it pretty much smooth sailing?
I think that's the main challenge in terms of that your response rate may be low, but what I do in each community, I try to encourage them, and if I don't get any responses, I'll say, remember the exit slip. Also, in the meeting, I put I remind them, but also as a follow-up to the meeting, I'll send the link to them again. And in class, if you want to increase the response rate, like I said, if students see that you are responding to their feedback, or in some cases, if you really want feedback as a one-time feedback, sometimes people would award bonus points to say, okay, then it's anonymous, but if you want some bonus points, you can give me your name. And that has also worked as well. And I like having just one survey link. It works for me to just have one survey link and just distinguish it by the date. So that way, nobody has to remember so many. First of all, it takes the workload off me. I don't have to create a new survey for every session. And Qualtrics is amazing.
Okay, wow. So I imagine that someone might be listening to this conversation today and they are interested in using this strategy, but they're a little bit hesitant. What would you recommend to them that they could start? How could they start? Or what would you say to them?
Well, because I'm an instructional designer by nature, the first thing that I would suggest is to decide why you don't want to use this strategy. Like, what's the purpose? Because a lot of times there are some strategies that just get thrown at us and they're nice to use, but to be truly intentional and harness the benefits, I would say, are you genuinely interested in finding out some formative feedback from your learners about what big understandings that they're having in your class? What are they confused about? What are you interested in? And the resource that I'll share, you'll see that they provide some other ways that exit slips can be used for. So I'll decide what's most meaningful for you. Make a decision about how you want to structure your questions. The way how I've shared mine, I adopted it based on one that was designed for learners, asking them about one big understanding. So I just kind of altered that to my setting, and you can do the same. Find a template that works for you. The other thing is to decide, how will you introduce this to students? How would you make it intentional? Are you going to collect data? Maybe as a faculty member that this is an area that students always struggle with, or in change management like myself, you're encountering a big process change. So now is a good time to do it if you don't have regular meetings. How are you going to share that data? How are you going to use the data? And start small. You may, if you have many classes, you may just decide that, okay, then I'm going to use it this semester. And the beauty about exit slips is that a lot of times when you do a course evaluation, you get your evaluation at the end, and there isn't an opportunity to make changes as you go along. With an exit slip, you can find that students are confused or major misconceptions, because as we know, if there is a misconception, you can't really build learning on misconception. You can't really lead change management if people are carrying the wrong mental models that you want them to carry. And so that's the beauty about exit slips, that you can make those changes. You can see what's going well, what's not going so well, what are suggested changes before the semester ends or before the change management process. It would be really devastating if I don't think change would occur if you're not aware of any misconceptions or their understanding.
That's so true. That's an excellent point. And I really like what you said about find out the why. And I like that you said that, because you're sharing the strategy that has worked for you, but you're being real. Yes, it works for me, but before you can use it, our viewers, make sure that it works for you. Something, why would you want to use this? So that's very good. And yes, start small, very important. So Dr. Pauline, any resources that you'd recommend that our viewers look at?
Well, there's one article that was published by ascd.org, and it talks about how to use different kinds of exit slips, and I will provide you with the link, or I can do a Control-P and give a PDF. So that's one. I'll also share examples of a report, or just share the questions that I've used. So, and I think I shared, like, if you have a polling system, you can use a polling system with this. Qualtrics, SurveyMonkey. You can even use Google's version of their survey if you don't have Qualtrics. I just love Qualtrics. Or a lot of learning management systems have surveys built in, and so don't feel tied to the technology. In fact, when this started, exit slips actually were on paper. But I would not recommend using paper because technology helps with data aggregation. So unless you're really tied to the paper, I would use the technology, because it also gives you an opportunity to reflect. For me, I use it with 6 learning communities. And so over time, I can see how certain instances of confusion have reduced because I've taken that feedback and made process improvement changes. For you as a faculty member, you can see how this changes from one class to another in terms of probably with the same cohort, or from, in the pharmacy school, we have cohorts. So you have a P1 year, P2 year. I can see, okay, then how are things changing from the P1 year to the P2 year, or from class of 2020 to class of 2021, things like that.
Wow. Well, I'll be checking out those resources. Thank you so much for being willing to share them. And in the final minute or so of this conversation, could you leave our viewers with an encouragement or a challenge?
For me, my job has taught me to be flexible, to be patient, and when you take input, to be genuinely interested in the input. And so one thing that I would leave with is, one, to start small, even if you're doing change or if you're doing a faculty feedback, if you're a faculty member. From a change management perspective, which is dear to my heart, you always want to meet people where they are, and an exit slip gives you that opportunity. It's anonymous, and don't take that feedback personal when they send me things and it's like, oh, I don't understand this. I don't feel like, oh, how dare them say that I did not explain this. It just lets me know where the mindset. And in learning and with change management, mindset is super important. And I think the onus is up on us to discover where their mindsets are. And so that's one thing that I'd leave with. And if you're in change management and things are not going the way they are, take it easy. And I think flexibility is one of the best things, and give people the benefit of the doubt. If you're a faculty member, I would suggest start small, decide on the class that you feel most comfortable with. And if it doesn't work the first time, do not give up. If I may share, I was working with a faculty member, and the first time when we did something that we had implemented, the students didn't respond, and she got kind of anxious, and then she realized the students didn't understand the value or the purpose of it. And a lot of times we assume that our learners know that I give you an activity in class, it should be good for you. Exactly. And sometimes they don't know. So we do have to communicate instructions, but also the value to them and the value to us. So that's what I would want you to leave with. So I hope you try it.
Yes, well said. Well said. I could not add a word to that. Well, and to our viewers, I would like to thank you so much for watching this conversation, and I would encourage you to share it with others. Dr. Pauline, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Great. We look forward to seeing you in the next version of This Works For Me Virtual Summit. See you soon.